Hi, it's Alabama Annie with another episode of Stories and Songs for you. And today you're going to hear a tale that I heard many times in my childhood. One my mother told. In fact, you can go back and listen to one of my podcast episodes entitled My Mother's Bedtime Stories, during which she talks about the gypsies who used to migrate through this area and across historic Lookout Mountain. And when they came through the valley, Little Will's Valley here, they would stay in our front yard sometimes, as she told it. And she said once that she thought they'd stolen my brother, but in actuality, they hadn't. He was just playing with the kids, and the woman saw a strange child and brought my brother back to my mother and said, "This one is not mine." So here's another tale about the gypsies that paint a different picture about them. Every year they came over Lookout Mountain out of Georgia, moving in a slow procession along the pass, impeding the automobile traffic. Their brightly painted horse-drawn wagons rolled at a snail's pace to the top, where after a while they would pull off the road into a grove of trees, rounding their wagons into a circle and setting up their camp. The gypsies were dark, swarthy people with foreign names that no one could pronounce. They were mysterious. They dressed in old-style clothing, the men wearing hand-sewn shirts and breeches, their caps and hats festooned with feathers and trinkets of various types. The women wore long, brightly colored skirts and beads and scarfs with lacy blouses that exposed more of their breasts than pleased those God-fearing mountain women. They would circle their brightly painted wagons, and in the center of their camp was the bonfire where they cooked their meals and would congregate at night. At night, the lanterns would be lit and the bonfire blazed high as fiddlers and mandolin and guitar players tuned up and played while the women danced in their brightly colored skirts, twirling in the firelight. The music carried on the wind and told everyone around that the gypsies had arrived. God-fearing folk locked up their chickens and hid their silver as wayward boys and curious people crept into their camp to have their fortunes told. Men paid to lay with those beautiful women, and housewives had their fortunes read inside the dark confines of Madame LaRue's wagon. They traded eggs and potatoes for silk scarves and trinkets. Young children were forbidden to go near the camp for fear that they would be stolen by these foreigners, or that they would corrupt their good little souls with witchery and enchantment. Ooh. Women turned a cold shoulder to their men when it was found that they had been to the camp. After a time, the gypsies would move on, prompted by the constable or men of the community, vanishing overnight with not a trace left behind. They moved over the mountain down into Little Will's Valley, heading south through Fort Payne, Alabama, and camped along the banks of Little Will's Creek just above a place called Greenwood. The preacher and his family came driving by and gave them a wide berth, and a farmer who lived in a nearby house locked his doors and put up his goats and chickens and loaded his shotgun. The constable rode up to their camp and warned the gypsies that they could not stay long, unhappy that they had come at all. But it was while they were camped there near Greenwood that little Willie Hart came running across the field on his way to find the doctor because his mother had taken very ill. But when Willie arrived at the doctor's house, the doctor had not been at home, and Willie didn't know what to do, so the boy ran back toward the gypsy camp. Wide-eyed at the brightly colored clothing and painted wagons, he stopped to rest a moment beside the creek where an old gypsy woman brought him a cup of tea and told him to rest a moment. "Is there a doctor here?" Willie asked, with tears streaming down his cheeks. "There is no doctor," she said, "but I am a healer, child." The old woman's eyes were very kind, and so he pleaded with her. "My mother is very ill. Would you come with me?" he asked. So the old woman went into her wagon and returned with a cloth bag slung over her shoulder. She tied a scarf around her head and followed Willie up over the ridge again into the holler where he and his mother lived. Once inside the cabin, the woman stood beside the boy looking down at his mother. She lay pale and feverish in her bed. The woman touched his mother's brow, and she opened her eyes, startled by the sight of this strange old woman peering down at her. The woman told Willie to put some water on to boil. She told him to add some salt to it. Then she began removing little cloth pouches from her bag and laid them on the bed. When the water came to a boil, she chose a pouch and poured the contents of the pouch into a cup and poured the water into it. She had Willie's mother to drink the water and then began laying warm compresses on his mother's neck and chest. She covered the woman with all of the quilts in the house and sat with her all that day into the night. Willie's mother awoke the next morning somewhat improved. She was able to drink warm tea and ate a bit of a biscuit. The old woman had Willie kill a chicken and pluck it, and she put it on to boil on the stove, feeding Willie's mother the broth when it was done. His mother rested again all that day, and she awoke the following morning and actually got out of bed again. Willie and his mother thanked the old woman and gave her as many eggs as they could find and a basket of potatoes for her troubles. They stood on the porch and watched her go back over the ridge until they could no longer see her as she disappeared through the trees. 2 days later, Willie's mother sent him back with a cake she'd baked for the old woman who had saved her life, and Willie went over the ridge again toward the gypsy camp, hoping to see the old woman and give her the cake. But the gypsies had moved on, and there was not a single sign that they had ever been camped beside the creek at all. So there we have the story of the Gypsies. And now here's a short little song about them. All right, here we go. Lock up your guns, laying hands, and hide your shiny thing. I can feel the changes coming, it's headed around the bend. That painted caravan of gypsies come to town again. That painted caravan of gypsies has come to town again. And then they were gone. Hope you have a good day.